Good Friday afternoon to you. Chris here, checking in live. Lunchtime chats. Just giving you some thoughts that I was thinking this week. I hope this message finds you doing well. It's the Wiley Report, and that's me, Chris Wiley. So today we're talking about how information is used and applied. And I saw this video this week, and I really wanted to something in my head. Sorry about that. I don't know what that is. Maybe that's a gray. Anyway, I saw this video this week, and I was thinking about how in my intersectional pedagogies class, one of the things we talk about often is how sometimes people have content, videos, instruction, whatever, where they take a topic and it's complex, or maybe it's not complex, but it's layered, multifaceted, and they make it a simple, they try to use logic for simplicity. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't work at all. And then we were talking about like ways that happens in information science, I feel, is how it happens when people make a varied content, and they'll have some parts are true and some parts are truth. And that varies depending upon what the topic is. And while I'm all for people to have ideas, values, and beliefs, there's no but in that sentence. Sometimes it gets a little cloudy when it comes to true versus truth. And then in really exploring how ideas are connected to values and beliefs. And so I saw this video and I figured this would be something great and interesting to break down. I confess I do not know this person. I've never, met them. I totally wholeheartedly agree that they can believe what they want. And I'm not necessarily critiquing them, or at least I won't be. I'm just critiquing the ideas. All right, just figured I'd get that as my little disclosure. Let's hit share screen and let's watch.
I'll say something controversial now. I don't believe in gentrification. I don't believe there's a such thing as gentrification. I'm gonna tell you what. I feel like we give our properties away. If there's redevelopment, there's gonna always be redevelopment. He just said something that a lot of people miss. Like, instead of complaining, buy up everything around it and control it. I used to have a meeting every other week, and I see my boy, Mr. Smith, out here. He used to show up to them. Nobody would come to the meetings. One or two people would show up to the meeting, and we're talking about, hey, they're getting ready to change your neighborhood. Hey, you need to buy this property. Hey, this is coming. You guys, the city has to post those notices in some cases like 6, 7, 8 months in advance. It don't sneak up on you. It doesn't sneak up on you. But see, when somebody, I don't care. If somebody gets shot by the police, we mad. See, if I say that out loud, then I'm cool, right? Right? If I say that, I'm cool, right? And I'm the one that approved both of John Boulevard here in Dallas. So why can't we put that same energy into owning our own neighborhoods? You can't keep screaming gentrification when Tim's and the Chris's and we're coming to you like, hey, they selling properties for $10,000. I don't want to live over there. No, well then don't get mad when the other person buys it. They move your life out of it because that's what's gonna happen. Yeah, I'll say something controversial now. I don't.
All right, that's our video for the day, and I was just I watched it earlier this week. I don't know how it showed up in one of the reels, and I thought that's really interesting. So I think there are a lot of things going on in the video. There really are. Because I think the things that come up for me is how this came up in literally 2 hours ago, a reading group that I was in, as well as meeting with some other interesting and interested people on topics about voting and civic engagement and the way engaging people on varied topics. So I think lately we have lots of people who state, I don't believe in, and they list what that is. For example, people say, I don't believe in climate change, or people say, I don't believe in science. And I feel first and wholeheartedly, people are entitled to believe whatever it is that they would like to believe. You get to choose, you get to decide. You've heard me say that numerous times. However, I think too, it's important to think about what the definition of belief is. And belief means an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists, as well as trust, faith, or confidence in something or someone. Yet, just because an individual doesn't accept that something is true or something exists doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. For example, the gentleman in the video talks about, meetings that are going on in the community to notify others that this property will be redeveloped, and the fact that no one necessarily comes to the meeting, or the fact that people don't necessarily want to spend $10,000, or they don't want to live in that same community, and the level of notification that a person has is 7 to 8 months. While I totally understand that the if you read the comments of the actual video, it was a seminar that talked about wealth building. Yes, it is true that people often use investment in property, in real estate property, to build wealth. I definitely can wholeheartedly understand that ownership and controlling your community is a means in order to do that. I also wish too that there was a greater context or greater detail of the video to show the full context of what he was saying, because just in that clip, I felt like there was a lot of things that were missing, because the reality is gentrification is a real thing. It does exist. It doesn't necessarily not exist because people are apathetic, or people, might not come to these meetings, or because people may not want to live in the community. Those things may be true, but there could be other factors. And even if we knew what those factors were, combined with the fact that people in his account are not coming to these meetings, those things would not be mutually exclusive. Also, the reality is awareness does not always mean application. Think about this in everyday context. Many of us, all our lives, have been told about the importance of wearing your seatbelt, or the importance and the consequence of texting while driving. Yet that awareness does not necessarily mean that people apply that same awareness to every single thing in every single context of their lives. And even if I am aware of it, I could still tell you I don't believe in it, but that doesn't change its importance or its significance or the fact that it does exist. I'm just telling you I don't believe in it. And I think that's similar to the statement that he makes. It doesn't make it not true. That's his experience, that's his positionality as a person that is investing in property, and that people are making complaints about, the neighborhood. Is it true that redevelopment happens in all neighborhoods? Yes. Is it true that different cities, states, or areas that have redevelopment provide some level of notification for this? Yes. Is it also true that in many cases, gentrification, revitalization, and redevelopment are often used as codified language for displacement? Yes, that's true too. They don't say that, but that's a part of redevelopment. And here's why I say that: because there's one side of the conversation, or one side of the process of knowledge of what, or in the concept of what is actually happening and happens, that is totally concerned with property and wealth attainment. Cool. That's business. That's, or as we call it, good business. But that's, even though that's true, that does not alleviate the fact within that action, it doesn't acknowledge economic disparity, or the disparity in and to access to financial resources and financial experiences. Because the counter to his statement would be, even if people are aware of that information, do they have access in cash or credit to $10,000 or whatever the amount is to buy that property? Is that their goal? Do they have a long-term plan of how they will maintain that property, even if it's an investment property? Do they have a plan for that? Is that something that they are seeking to do? So it isn't just, hey, they're revitalizing my neighborhood. Hey, they're redeveloping my neighborhood. If I don't get in, I'm going to lose that. That's true. But there's also other layers of that happen. And it's also true that much of redevelopment, especially when it turns to housing and neighborhoods, displaces marginalized and underrepresented groups under the guise of big business, good business. I'm not critiquing it. I'm not saying people are wrong to do that. I'm just saying the playing field for that is not always equitable and fair, even with the awareness and the knowledge that is presented. It is not, because everybody does not have that same opportunity. And I won't say opportunity, maybe the better word is that everybody else will not necessarily have that ability. And I think oftentimes in statements like this, what gets lost is the fact that everybody doesn't have that ability, even though they were aware of it. And while we can say 1 person, 2 person, 5 people, 10 people did, there'll still be others who were not able to do the same thing that another individual or individuals do. We're not, nor will we ever be comparing apples to apples in this scenario. Just passing tips. Just passing tips. And I also thought that, as I was saying, when the reality is that some of these situations are portfolio enhancement and investing in real estate, for other people, it's the erasure of entire communities, even with the awareness of this knowledge. I think it's also problematic when people use true events and they're stating them in comparison to other events, like when he talks about, people get upset about the police shooting people. In the same argument, in the same statement, it says, "Oh yeah, but I approved the structure naming for Botham Jean." Oftentimes statements like that, they're disconnected to the main point, and they also are more like distractors, because Botham Jean, many other people have experienced harm, have been murdered, and the deeper issue is that injustice shouldn't happen to anyone. Is it honorable that there was a physical structure that was named after Botham Jean? Yes, that's honorable. No one will argue with you on that. Yet it is also true that Botham Jean should be alive, because when we remember the story, he was the Black man that was in his apartment, and the white cop assumed that he was in the wrong apartment, or there was an injury in hers, and he was killed. That people should be upset about those things, and I think the deeper issue is that there are numerous names that we're saying that have experienced violence from individuals, violence from the police. The who is not the point. The point is that many people's the acts of violence themselves have been senseless and needless, and they continue happening. And I think oftentimes as well, what happens is people are extremely disconnected because it happens so much, or they're desensitized, so they just make these statements. And it's like, but that might be true. People are upset, but do they not have a right to be? And that whole idea or argument of keep that same art energy for the community that you could buy up the block. Buying up the block and being able to purchase property in a community doesn't change the fact that many people live in Blackness every day. It's not something that we can take off. I can't, me, you, us, many of us that represent this melanin that you see right here, we can't change the fact that there are disparate experiences that happen. Those disparate experiences happen to individuals, even if they're a billionaire. They still have that story, because there are other people that will not see and choose to consistently not see their humanity, their dignity. It happens each and every day with people who have multiple identities. Just saying. Just a thought. What's my other point? Okay, the other part in the conversation is the American dream, which is mentioned in the comments. Because someone literally wrote, "This was spot on. I've never seen so many other realtor plaques in neighborhoods that used to be predominantly Black. Elders who persevered through civil rights, Jim Crow, and every movement, started to fight for our rights, worked hard to establish a life of security and creating generational wealth for their offsprings. However, the crack epidemic eradicated the dream. Bobo and Ray Ray surrendered what was rightfully theirs, and now you have so many others in the hood now, as much about police shootings." I think it's a common framework and a statement that's made, especially considering that I say that as a person that has parents that were born in the late 40s. And so when you think about the American dream of home ownership was definitely a way to attain obtain wealth, in addition to education being something that people use as a tool to obtain wealth. Yet what's often not talked about in the same conversation or in the same relationship and connectivity is the cost of the American dream, financially, economically, the disparity, the racial inequality that is often experienced within the attainment of the American dream. I love, there's this book we read in my first semester as a PhD student called The New Noir, The New Black by Dr. Orly Clerget, where she talks in one of the chapters about the Black middle class and homeownership, and how, the conversation about the American dream, about how certain groups of people, because it's specifically Black people, she's really detailing the migration experience of Caribbean immigrants versus Black individuals, and talking about home ownership and just that idea of what people were supposed to achieve with owning a home and the challenges that came with that, because oftentimes as parents age, they had children that either no longer lived in the neighborhood itself had gone down for various reasons, or the children themselves, they were not necessarily financially in a place, the adult children were not financially in a place to maintain the same home that parents and grandparents held on to. So we don't often talk about that. It's just framed as apathy or lack of financial planning or lack of something, some level of inadequacy. And I don't think that's always a true, accurate picture. I think there's often a deeper truth than just the black and white facts. That's just what that's what I think. There's also the fact that we don't really have conversations about mortgages and pricing and how that's has increased over time. I think there was a great website, I can't remember what the name of it is, Bad Librarian MMI, that really talked about the cost of mortgages over time. And while we understand, at least colloquially, that yesterday's price is not today's price, we don't talk about how that affects the experience of purchasing property. Though the thing that's more prevalent is, hey, you can do this too. And while that's true, I'm not saying that's not accurate. I'm just saying that's not the whole picture. That's not the whole part of the conversation. Yes, it's true that there are many resources out there at your local library on videos that teach you about getting your credit together and having good financial literacy. There's literature that teaches you how to invest in property. The deeper question, though, is that your choice. Is that something that you would like to do? Is that your dream too? It isn't just, one-sided in the sense that you're complaining about living in this neighborhood that has been redeveloped. And control, yes, you can control it to a certain degree, but we don't really talk with the way that framework works. To me, is often tension filled and problematic because it puts things on either or. We don't talk about the fact that, people don't necessarily under the what I'm really trying to say, excuse me, we don't have conversations about good business. And when we say good business, I mean policies that are completely legal, but somehow disenfranchise or erase entire communities under the fact that it's good business. Think about this in the context of a hotel never tells you can't stay there, but $4,000 a night would, much like, depending on the price of the property, would tell you whether or not you can continue to stay there. Or think about the number of neighborhoods and apartment complexes that have been bought by other entities and groups. While it's completely legal for that to happen, oftentimes what you see that happens to the people that were living there is the rent prices are increased. That happens. But what happens when a person can no longer afford to stay there, or their option is, hey, they can buy this property, yes or no, they might be able to afford that. But we don't talk about that process and how some people, yeah, they're good. It doesn't really matter what it'll cost. They'll be able to do that. But that's not everybody's story. Everybody doesn't get that ability, or how some neighborhoods revitalization or as we're talking about what's the word? Redevelopment means that they come to certain neighborhoods and say, we're gonna give you $15,000 for your property. Or back to the prices thing. In Georgia, I think about like my parents' generation using that spot on argument that the person made. My parents bought the land, which was 2 acres, and the home and purchased and built a house on the land for $30,000. That isn't possible these days. That isn't. These days you can see small parcels. Basically, when I say small, I mean a square in the front that are $40,000, and you haven't even built the house. Or I think about the experience of growing up, and at the end of the road, there was land that cows literally grazed on. They took quarter lots and sold $250,000 homes, and that 250,000 was the low end. That was not the high end. That happens all the time. Or I think about Stacey Ann Chin. I don't know if you've ever seen her page. She's a creative and well-known poet. Talked about, living in New York and in a building that was, pretty much a real good space for community of a wide array of diverse individuals. And how, later in time it was bought by somebody else, and people were priced out of the very community that they lived in their entire life. Or the experience of, making money, having good credit to buy a home, but because of so much redevelopment and gentrification, her ability to buy a home within the neighborhood that she was more accustomed to was a disparate experience because of redevelopment. The prices in that same neighborhood under redevelopment, under gentrification, priced out people. But that's good business though, right? And I'm not saying that good business is wrong. I'm just saying sometimes the entire logic of it puts either or, when more than one thing can be true at the same time, and things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Or maybe the better lens is in an intersectional way of looking, and there are more than one ways to view this experience. That just because a person doesn't have action does not mean that they're apathetic, or that they don't care, or that they'll still be affected by the decision whether or not they have the money to purchase property or not. Just saying, it's just problematic when people have videos like this, because some parts are true, but all of it isn't truth. And true is the quality of being true, and truth means universal and unchanging. And I just think sometimes in these grand scale conversations that are 5-minute videos or more, we don't have that conversation. And we should have that conversation. That's why I like the one comment in the video that said, hey, they hoped, like I said earlier a few minutes ago, that they hoped that there was a longer video, because gentrification exists. The speaker doesn't believe it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. The numerous neighborhoods that experience that all the time, that's a real thing. There are classes in college that are teaching people about redesigning neighborhoods, but yet they're not considering the stakeholders that are currently in those neighborhoods, the business owners and leaders, in their plan for redevelopment. So the flip side is sometimes, yes, people can get an opportunity to purchase property in a neighborhood, and sometimes they exclude you completely, all under good business. Just sharing thoughts. Think about it. Use your critical thinking skills, okay? All right, that's all I got. Thanks for listening. How information is used and applied. Think about that. Have a good day. Y'all have a good weekend. Bye.